So another topic related to sort of coaching was communication. I think people often need training in communication, whether it's their personal lives or in their professional lives, especially if there's been something that happens to them, then they're not happy about it. A lot of times people will go to their manager in HR, which they have the right to do, to talk about something they're uncomfortable about. But sometimes it seems that a person would like to be able to tell another person that what they just did made them uncomfortable, and they don't seem to know exactly, they don't have the words or they're emotional about it. And one of the things I find myself teaching a lot in our coaching sessions is open and honest communication strategies for people who just want to speak their truth in a way that will actually get their point across and get the other person changing their behavior. And I feel like that can just go a long way in nipping conflicts that don't need to go further than they unfortunately do. It seems that a lot of trainings that I've facilitated, the conflict could have been handled between two people and improved that relationship between them, like conflict bringing us closer together, which is a lesson you've put together. Um, and I just wish more professionals had that information, the strategies for open and honest communication or nonviolent communication.
Could you unpack that when you say nonviolent communication? What does that mean?
Well, speaking your truth, starting a dialogue, which is communication with a purpose, to get a message across kind of strategically to let a person know that what has occurred was not okay. But people don't know how to say that, so they tend to avoid, like they do the fight or flight. They avoid it and become kind of a passive aggressive responder, or they fight, or they'll talk to somebody else about it instead of just going straight to the source and saying, I appreciate our relationship enough. I would like to be able to work with you productively. So can I just tell you how that impacted me so we can avoid that going forward? But that's just too hard for some people to say, including myself.
If I understand what you've said, which is that the core is the courage to be able to speak your truth and do it in a way that's effective, right? Anyone can speak truth, and but not everyone can do it in a way that's effective. And I think that in the context of education, there's something called a gradual release of responsibility. In an ideal context, people would be allowed to engage in the process of nonviolent communication and fail, and then learn from their mistakes, and that's where we want the training to evolve to, where people are given a chance to fail forward, right, by exploring and leveling by what we call a leveling process, right, where we just begin with what people are comfortable with, right, and so from your experience, where do you think and again, leveling simply means that we start at where a person is comfortable with, and then we gradually ask the person to do just a little bit more. So from your experience, when it comes to nonviolent communication, what's the first level that people should be developing from your experience?
Well, I think it does seem that out of all the levels, your average person doesn't have much of any of them. Like the purposeful ignoring is something that hits people like, oh, I can just do that. I can just not respond to something that I found annoying, or I can just stop going to that part of the lunchroom at this time of that day, if that's something that annoys me. I think the steps beyond that, like affirmative questions, affirmative statements, are really new to people, like structuring your statement to get another person understanding the impact in a simple, concise way is also new to a lot of people. And maybe unless you're an educator and you've done work in like restorative justice and you've taught me a little bit about that as an educator. But I think I could be wrong, and you tell me that I don't think a lot of people have that. So I think all levels of the open, honest, or nonviolent communication model that we teach are new to people. I think people find ways to do it based on a great role model that they had, or they just don't do it.
So
They
I'm wondering though, just hold on to
maybe
that
I'm
thought, because
pessimistic.
no, I'm wondering if people do have some of the skills, but they have not been given a systematic way of thinking about the skill. Because everyone can ignore, right? We all know what it means to ignore something or someone. We do
Hmm.
it, but when it's purposeful is the key, right? It's not
Yeah,
just something, it needs to be, there has to be a specific purpose and reason why you're ignoring. And it's driven by, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, it's really driven by the question, what is the reason for what the person is doing? So there's a level of interrogation that we
yeah.
need to ask ourselves, right? Why is this person just doing it to meet a need? Then and are there other ways for that need to be met, right? Perhaps is the next question. So people do, I think, have some of the skills, but it's perhaps it's the naming that they don't have so that they can actually intentionally implement that. And I love the way you framed it, that that first level of nonviolent communication, which is ignoring with an explicit purpose or purposeful ignoring.
Yes, because there is non-productive ignoring, like when you're brushing a problem under the rug and it's still there. I think there's the purposeful ignoring that can work. And you're like you said, I think people know how to ignore but don't know how to do it where it does technically send a message. I think when people are navigating their everyday workplace, they're not constantly, needing like training in all these areas. They are where they are because they're good at what they do. It's when they run into a circumstance where things just get really, really messy, and then maybe their emotions go up. And that's when they need a nonviolent communication strategy. But it's hard to do it in a moment where you're heated, where someone really is frustrating you to the point where your emotions are overflowing. I think that's when people need it, but they don't always know. They didn't even see it coming that they were going to need a strategy. And they usually seems to me that they feel like at a loss. They had no other option. Like they're telling themselves a story that I have no other option except to respond in kind. I think that's one of the great things we teach is there is that other option, but it involves so much to be able to get to that option with the we teach with our managing emotions, the being able to recognize the emotion as just a warning sign, like a notification, like on the dashboard, not the person in the driver's seat, and then having your step for letting it go, and then being able to then clearly see the productive next step. They can't see the nonviolent communication strategy that they need to participate in because they haven't done the they haven't learned how to remove that emotion. And hopefully most people don't have to experience that moment where at work where they lose their temper so badly. But I think when it does happen, that's when people need information and hopefully they can get it before something bad happens. But people,
Yeah.
that's why I mean by proactive training. In our last episode, I talked about our proactive training being a helpful um, tool, but realistically, sometimes you need to address things that happen.
It's not so much that we want to prevent conflict, but we want to make conflict the secret sauce that increases productivity, that makes a better product, that gets people out of traditional ways of thinking, that moves people and moves strategy to what's going to happen next and not what happened yesterday. So I think from my perspective, conflict is actually okay, but it's when we use violent methods to negotiate our differences of opinion, that's when organizations, whether they're nonprofit or for profit,
Mm.
do set themselves up for I'm going to use the word cancer, right? Whether it's malignant or whether it's not, I think that's the key. I would say that one of the things that we're moving towards is a more scenario based approach with a level of abstraction that is applicable to, I'm going to say, 99% of organization, all right? Let's begin to talk about going forward for the next couple of programs, the diva. So imagine that you have an employee that's amazingly good, like they're super, like whatever the industry is, whether it's banking, finance, education, they are at the top
You
of their
need them.
game.
You need them.
You need them, right? They've got amazing pieces. And let's assume that that everyone else that's not a diva has made a decision to go left, and they feel that they should have the professional ability to go right. That's conflict, right? What do you do?
Yeah. It makes me think of a concept I've heard about a while ago, toxic conflict, which is about parenting kids who are exposed to toxic conflict. It affects their ability to, navigate the world in a healthy way for themselves.
Mm.
Like conflict being healthy and natural is different than toxic conflict. It
Okay, I
all
like
depends
that.
on how it's handled.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
That's
So
what's coming to my mind.
how do I know? Like, so let's continue to begin to reflect on that diva in the workplace. And I like the distinction you've talked about, which is it's to me it's a great name. Conflict, okay, but then there's toxic conflict. So how do I know I'm in the area of toxic conflict? What might be something I would notice
Oh,
about it?
some warning signs.
Hmm.
That's a great question. I mean,
Is it emotional? Like, is it
oh,
rage?
definitely. I mean, I guess if emotions reach a point where maybe there's certain specifics you could list out that would be signs of emotions taking the driver's seat. I mean, there's some
Blaming.
obvious things that come to mind, like the change in the overall environment, maybe cliques forming, people taking sides, a lack of communication. People are shutting down, or there's unprofessional conduct starting,
So gossip,
gossip,
rumors,
raised voices, passive aggressive behavior.
people demanding things.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something I think we do want to explore because I like your idea, right? And I think some of the things you've mentioned is formative in nature and where we do need to have some warning signs
Yeah.
to really understand when it's toxic. Because conflict is powerful if people just understand its purpose and understand the nonviolent ways of moving people through conflict. So I like what you said that the first level is purposeful ignoring, right? And so what does that mean? Purposeful ignoring.
Well, sometimes I think of it as not giving attention to something that a person might be seeking attention for.
Mhm.
Sometimes I see it as a non-rude way to just not participate in something you don't want to participate in, finding a way out of it. So, like if you have that colleague who loves to complain about the past and you are frustrated that there's just too much ongoing conversations about the past without enough ways to prevent it going forward, that could be something you ignore and say, that is frustrating. Let's find something. Let's try to think of how we're going to do it next time so this doesn't happen again. I think it's a creative way to just redirect away from a person without being rude, without yelling or saying something passive aggressive. It's
You're
um
too nice, though. I think you're too nice. I'm going to say that purposeful ignoring, and this is my personality, is actually a very potent way of extinguishing something that is perhaps we could use the word like it's low grade, but it's something that is like one, two, three, four, five times, not a big deal. But if it becomes 12, 20, 30 times, then it's almost like a dripping faucet. Over
mhm.
time, it becomes intolerable. And
Okay.
so if it's like that, then what we need to do is one of the ways of fixing that faucet is to actually, which seems counterintuitive, is to actually ignore, right? Like the idea of a fire, right? And we
Yeah.
we we take away the oxygen from that fire, that is to me the imagery I love to use when I think of purposeful ignoring.
Yeah, when people hear it as, they just see it on the screen, and sometimes people think, well, that seems sort of like a rude thing to do, like to just walk away from a person or to redirect a conversation away from something someone said. But when you really get them thinking about like a specific moment that they could use it in, they see it as kind of a relief that, oh, I can do something to stop this. I don't have to just be the people pleaser person I am and just deal
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, that's really important.
Because it's
Um,
your workspace too. You have to be able to be happy and healthy where you work and productive. And if this is getting in the way, or it will get in the way eventually, if it's not nipped, then it's the less intervening option for nonviolent communication.
You're right. And another way I like to frame it is that, we all have our head trash in the sense that we all have ways of dealing with frustration that are annoying to other people. And sometimes when we are in the workplace, we just need to, in a purposeful way, ignore some things, but not all things. And it's I guess that's one way of thinking about it. We've come to the end of this segment, and we do look forward to continuing this conversation around communication and leveling up your skill at nonviolent communication.